Well, welcome to Radio OPAC. We're a division of the Ohio Prison Arts Connection. It's an internet program. It's on Facebook and YouTube. We record our sessions. They are interviews, performances, panel discussions, and much more. We focus on the transformative power of the arts. And we relate it to the justice system, but really, it's all about all of our well-being from the arts. So we'll meet our guest, Sheila Okere, today in just a second, but I want to welcome all of our incarcerated friends at the 27 Ohio prisons. We send in DVDs of the shows to all the prisons in the OPAC art packets, and we're so glad that you are joining us too. So remember, the shows are taped, and so tell your friends, if they missed it, to go on to Facebook, Ohio Prison Arts Connection, or onto YouTube, Ohio Prison Arts Connection. But let's meet our guest. Here she is, Sheila Okere. And how are you?
I'm good.
Very, very good. Let me tell everybody a little bit about you and how you got involved in the justice system and more with activism in our community as a medical student at The Ohio State University. First of all, you're a third-year medical student and you want to have an emphasis on internal medicine. You also have talked about wanting to make a community impact. And I wanted to ask you because we are taping this during the pandemic and COVID is in the hospitals and you go into the hospitals. You're doing a lot of your work though at home. And how has it been for you and the medical students and the staff around you dealing with COVID?
I think it impacted like everyone a little differently. I think kind of staff is overwhelming, especially with the surges going on. And staff, physicians, nurses, social workers, etc. And then you have like medical students that are still trying to learn in this environment with some kind of like restrictions. So it does require a lot of adaptability on our end, and it is a bit limited in some spaces, but it's also kind of like this new opportunity and new experience that like of education that is very unique to us. So I think it it has its challenges, but also it's there's a perspective in it where you can say like, okay, like this is something that like we, you can say you actually experienced. So it goes a little both ways.
Yes, you're living history actually, and it's a very dramatic time, and it's a time of crisis, and you are at the forefront as a medical person to be part of this. So you have to find ways to relax. You have to find ways to ease the stress. And I know you have some hobbies that you
Yeah.
do, and you love to cook,
Yes. Love it.
and you do custom wigs
Yeah.
and pole dancing,
Yeah.
which is a very good way to relax. And certainly the arts help us to do that too with music and reading and movies. And I'm sure if you have time that you partake in those things as well.
Yeah.
But you became part of a national group called Physicians for Human Rights.
Hmm.
And how did that start? And why did you get involved in that?
Well, last summer actually, like a lot of things happened last summer. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, we saw something that's supposed to be like a virus become very political and
Yes.
divisive as well. And I think for me, I have a lot of conversations about a lot of these things and go on rants, but I think I was just like, I was exhausted to the point, like, I don't want to talk about it. I want to really do something and not feel like wherever I'm at in life, I have too much going on to really make the impact I want to. Because, I can be like, oh, like when I graduate med school, then I can do this type of work that I want to do. Or when I, you know, graduate residency, I can do this work. And I'm like, there's always going to be something. So I feel like if if I really want to do anything, there's never going to be the perfect moment but now. So I wrote like a blog on online med ed, and it was essentially talking about like physicians involvement in activism, and it started talking about like the summer of 1964 with the civil rights movement, the marches on Montgomery, Martin Luther King, and how physicians bust down to Montgomery, Alabama, and Mississippi to kind of provide like healthcare to like the segregated South, as well as like healthcare during civil rights riots that were supposed to be peaceful, and they were turned violent by law enforcement. And they provided just so many different healthcares despite, not having access to like what they needed or the resources that they felt, were adequate. They worked with what they got because they knew the impact that they can make. And to the point where like Martin Luther King had those same physicians marching with him on the March of Washington. And they formed like the Medical Committee of Human Rights. I'm probably botching that up, but and like that's kind of like where I ended up just doing a lot more research after that and trying to find organizations now that do similar things like that related towards human rights. And I found Physicians for Human Rights, which is a nonprofit organization that works both nationally and internationally using healthcare to report human rights violations around the world. And I also figured out that they had a student chapter, national student chapters that's housed in over 60 medical schools across the country. Ohio State didn't have a chapter, and so I was like, well, I should probably. I was thinking about starting it, and then I talked to Dr. Stone because one of my friends have always said like Dr. Stone's amazing. Dr. Linda Stone is really about the people, and so like I emailed her and she emailed me back like literally hours later, and then we talked and she kind of hyped me up a little bit because I wasn't sure because I'm not a very like I'm not like super like out there and stuff like that. But she kind of like she kind of gave me the push I needed to just go about it. And so I dived in and I found 9 other really, really passionate students that were just really about it. And here we are.
Well, yes, and we want to talk about one group in particular that I'm so happy to be a small part of. But you've started all these groups and you have executives that take over these groups, and you take over you oversee all of them, but the executives do the work in these groups, and that you do something with youth and mental health. There's a library with anti-racism material collection, faculty and mentor, public health, homeless shelter. And then the one that Dr. Stone connected us with, and it's called House Call. Can you explain a little bit about House Call?
So when I was kind of like drafting up ideas for like PHR, one thing that I really wanted to do was I really wanted to do work with like that tackle mass incarceration in our incarcerated population, because I'm really big about like breaking stigmas and this social hierarchy that we've all created, whether it's based on race or age or beauty or size or what you do for a living. I'm just kind of really focused on really breaking those things to kind of have it like we're all humans, and these social hierarchies are really just made up to divide us rather um, find a means for all of us to kind of, despite our privilege, to really see each other for who they are and realize how much we can gain from each other. And so, and I think those our incarcerated population are oftentimes overlooked and stigmatized based off their past, and us really defining the mistakes they make at one point in time. And I really just wanted medical students and physicians, oftentimes we come from privileged backgrounds to a certain extent, and so I kind of just wanted to break that third wall and not see people through a glass window, but actually be in the room with them And so we had connected, me and you, Pat, and Annette, and Dr. Stone, and we ended up getting in contact with the warden, who was like so cool. And she really kind of gave us the green light to do all these amazing things with the women in ORW. And I'm still kind of processing how this whole thing kind of happened, but I'm really blessed. It's really exciting.
And we should mention too, when you say PHR, that's Physicians for Human Rights, the
Yes.
acronym for that, so people know that aren't familiar with it. And Dr. Barbara Rankin of Admissions, I believe, is also
Yes.
associated with the project, to mention her as well. And to say that there are 230,000 or so women jailed, incarcerated in the United States. And so when you linked up with the Ohio Reformatory for Women, what happened then was the Warden Terry Baldoff, linked the group house call up with 5 women within the prison. And then Annette Dominguez of Tapestry, which is a therapeutic program, linked the group up with 5 women who are returned citizens from the same prison. And then the med students are there, we advisors are there, and we all meet on a Zoom call. And we had our first meeting, and that was a very interesting discussion about women's health, trauma. We even got into a little bit of childbirth and how women are treated who are incarcerated, who seek medical care. What were your impressions after that very first house call?
I think when after the first house call, I was like super excited. I was excited that they were willing to really engage in us and lean into this experience. Because one thing I was very adamant about is I don't want this to seem like we're just looking at people, like observing people, like through a glass window. Like I wanted us to also, like, we were sitting in a circle, and just like, girl on girl talk and stuff like that. But also one thing that I didn't consider is that we don't talk about trauma-based care when we're talking about incarcerated women. And a lot of things, like, although everyone's story is different and it's not our responsibility to know their story, but we also have to know that, um, you know, there are certain kind of like stepping stones of trauma that can lead somebody to be in situations that turn out unfavorably in terms of, being incarcerated. And we have to consider that when we're taking history, if we're doing physical exams, or we're taking note of their care. And then the second thing I realized is, like, there has to be stronger communication between physicians that are not inside the system, as well as like the healthcare that is inside the system. Because oftentimes there's, especially like with media and stuff, there's oftentimes judgment passed on healthcare providers that are in the system being inadequate. And I mean, every situation is different, but that may not necessarily be true. It may be the line of communication that is inadequate. So we're not working together with each other. We're, more so criticizing what one is doing versus the other.
And what we should also note is that 5 medical staff from the prison join us as well. And
Yes.
so we have that connection made. And to my thinking, this may be the only program of its nature in the world. I may be wrong, but it's so unusual to have the cooperation of the prison, as we do from Warden Baldoff, and to have the women who are inside, outside of prison joining us, who we call the med squad. And because they're teaching everybody about women's health. And so they're part of the squad. And what resulted was your committee making med squad certificates for each of the women, which they love. And also we discussed the baby being born, and the mother and her care. And then you medical students made a Shutterfly book of words and pictures encouragement for this baby that is housed in the nursery with his mother at the prison. And I just wanted to give a few of the testimonials that the women offered regarding what their experience was like. These are inside and outside women. One said it was a feeling of fitting in with community. Another, to think medical students would even consider our opinion is wonderful. And then this one, watching and being part of a group of individuals and to have a voice and hopefully an impact on upcoming doctors is a privilege I will never forget. So the impact on these women is great. And the program goes on for a year. And for the second house call, though, it became a book club. It was storytelling, narrative medicine, which is used by doctors, and it's an art form. And then bibliotherapy in the second session with Dr. Michelle Harper and The Beauty in Breaking. And tell us how that went.
Oh yeah. So yeah, like everything just kind of fell in place. I mean, Pat, you like came up with the idea of like having a book club, and you helped it kind of gather up the funds, and we distributed it. And Jessica Munoz, amazing friend of mine and fourth year medical student, she just kind of like, you know, went out on a limb and contacted the Dr. Michelle Harper, the author, and they got back to us, and she was really excited to do this. And we all like met, and it was really awesome because I related to it. There are so many layers of the book that you can relate to, and I don't want to give off anything because we're only halfway through the book, and I want people to get the book. But there's so many layers to the book you can relate from, whether it's being a minority, being a woman, being, even if you in my shoes, being a medical student, and also just being someone from a traumatic past, a traumatic history. There's so many layers that all of us could relate to. So every woman was able to see herself through, in one way or another, in that book. And I think it really spoke to the fact that, you know, fundamentally we're all human, and yes, there are different levels to our lives, but we can all relate to some degree to this one book. And I thought it was really awesome how we could all like have that same emotion when this happened, or I'm like, oh, on chapter 5, and like, and one of the other prisoners was like, I felt the same way. And I know there was one prisoner who like, she read the whole book. So like
in one day.
In one day.
Miss
So
Davis is an overachiever.
yeah, and I was like, oh my gosh, girl, I need to catch up with you. Like,
I know. And
yeah.
what was really interesting is Dr. Harper's reactions when the women inside gave their reactions to her book. And you probably watched her face on Zoom too.
Yeah.
And she was silent during that because she took that all in. And then when you did the follow-up with Dr. Harper, what did she say?
Oh, she was beyond excited. She was like, when's the next one? How can I be more involved and connect with you guys regularly? So that was really exciting that she number one, I was kind of honored that she would go out her way to like, you know, just meet with us. And then the fact that she's like reaching out to us like, okay, let's do this. I'm like, okay, like that's so awesome. And when the ladies were sharing their story, like I know me and Jessica were like, okay, like don't cry. Cause it was just like, it was just a lot. It was a lot, but I really appreciated that experience. So,
you know, medicine is an art and a science. And unless we get to the art part of it, part of the healing is not going to be there because there's bedside manner, there's listening to the prisoner's story or the patient's story, and telling our own stories in relationship to that. Also, the arts, as far as the medical students at OSU, there's the medicine and the arts program that bring the arts in because it increases creative thinking, and doctors have to think on their feet. Not everything is going to be textbook. In fact, nothing is textbook. So you have to be that creative person, and the arts allow us to do that. And the arts are allowing the inmates to express feelings that they have not expressed before. And I could see that happening with them. And you have a paragraph that means a lot to you for our moment of reflection today. And so it's from The Beauty in Breaking, and a New York Times best-selling book that we used for book club. We'll be doing that again in February with the author. And we've asked Sheila to read a paragraph from the book to end our session today. So Sheila, if you would.
Yeah. No, I'm not gonna give away anything because I want people to read the book. But so yeah. All of us had converged in these hollowed halls for a chance to reveal our wounds, to offer up our heart and our pain to be eased. If my brother's body could be patched up, then certainly in its own time his spirit could mend too. If we looked, if we named the problem, identified and examined it, then there was the opportunity to fix it, the chance for us to walk out under the stoic pines healed or on our way to being so.
Thank you. And to be able to discuss the problems with the women inside and outside, the medical staff, the warden, the medical students, the OSU advisors, and Annette Dominguez, and being able to join has been an honor. It's just an honor and to be with everyone. And thank you for spearheading this with everything else that you have to do. And we appreciate that. We really do. We're going to be doing more with medicine and the arts in the future with Radio OPAC. So we want to make sure we keep you included in that. And so, yes, this is taped, and yes, share with your friends, share with your family, and we'll see you next time. And thank you, Sheila, on Radio OPAC.
Disregarding every stumbling block stuck in our way, we're gonna make it happen.